Have you ever wondered how you could transform your most painful experiences into creative gold, into something that could attract clients to you? I know I've wondered about that because, life hasn't been always easy for me. Sometimes it still isn't. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about transformational storytelling, how the author is very much like an alchemist and can turn life's challenges into gold.
Are you an entrepreneur, small business owner, or consultant looking to boost your authority, influence, and impact? The Author Switch podcast with best-selling, award-winning author Carma Spence is your answer. Tune in for actionable advice, powerful strategies, and engaging interviews to turn on your author switch and take your business to the next dimension.
The Author Switch.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Switch podcast. I am your host, Carma Spence, and I help entrepreneurs write, publish, and market client attracting books so that they can grow their businesses. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about how you can become your own Rumpelstiltskin. You know the little guy who would say, "You can't guess my name," and then he would be able to spin straw into gold. Well, okay, you may not be able to spin literal straw into literal gold, but you can spin metaphorical straw into metaphorical gold and sometimes into actual gold. And that's what this episode is about. Now, we all go through tough times. And some of our tough times are little tough times, and some of our tough times are big tough times. Maybe you've dealt with the loss of a loved one, or maybe a terrible diagnosis, or maybe you lost your home, or all sorts of things really big, terrible could have happened to you. Or maybe you stubbed your toe, or maybe you dropped your favorite porcelain object and it shattered in a million bits. These challenges in life, whether they're small or big, can be used to create stories that help your audience transform their life, choose you as their go to person for whatever it is that you do, and help build trust and authority in the marketplace. That's what an author being an alchemist is all about. So here are some different things that can help you reframe this is sort of a thought experiment episode where I'm sort of thinking the thought through. So first of all, there's psychological benefits to writing. Sometimes writing out, well, first of all, if you're writing affirmations, you want to literally take a literal pen, and write it on literal paper, because there's something about the act of writing with your hand, not typing, but writing, that actually helps you learn something and make it go into your subconscious. So the psychological benefits of writing and the other benefits of writing are you learn things better when you write about them. You can clarify your thoughts better when you write about them. You can work your way through tough situations by writing about them. There's just something about the physicality of writing that helps turn on areas of your brain that are not turned on when you do other activities. Another thing you can do to transform these tough times into gold is to use them as inspiration for fictional stories or fictional characters in the stories that you tell to illustrate your points. That's why we have the phrase, names were changed to protect the innocent. And usually they're not all that innocent, but you're protecting them because you're using their story that really happened, because when something really happened, it feels more authentic and relatable than if you completely made it up whole cloth. So using your real life to inspire fictional stories that help illustrate points that you're trying to teach can be a way to spin your straw into gold. Also, there's something about writing about the challenging times of your life, whether you share them with others or not, that helps you build resilience. Resilience is really important because, well, you're going to be challenged again, and you're going to be challenged again, and you're going to be challenged again. And when you build up resilience, you're able to handle each successive challenge with a little bit more aplomb. So now let's talk a little bit about narrative techniques to create impact. Using the challenges in your life, you can come up with the adjectives, the nouns, the action verbs that help make your storytelling, your marketing, your writing in general more visceral, more experiential, more authentic. And one way you do this is to identify the universal theme and what happened to you. So, for example, and I've shared this same story. I always go back to the story because I love the story. When I was in elementary school, actually, and the Sinbad movie came out where one of the characters had an eye on her hand. So, like, I took some colored pens and I was drawing an eye on my hand. And one of my classmates wanted me to draw the eye on her hand, and she paid me for it. And next thing you know, there was lines of people at recess waiting for me to draw an eye on their hand. Very simple. So, what are the universal principles or universal stories that I can pull out of that? The one I most often use is you can sell anything to anyone if you can tap into that thing, that little emotion. For some reason, all these people felt like they couldn't draw an eye on their own hand. I don't know why, but I tapped into that. And they came to me because they thought I was some sort of magical eye drawing person. Well, if you can spin what you're trying to sell into that magical eye drawing person for all those people who don't think they can draw an eye on their hand, then you've got a sale. There's other universal stories in there, like, I was resistant to doing it in the first place, and I said yes to something I was unsure of, and next thing you know, I had lots and lots of candy money, much to the chagrin of my mother. She didn't like me buying candy, but I bought it anyway. Alright, so you find universal themes in the stories of your life. And, if you're familiar with Dan Henry, he often calls these money stories because you can take any story in your life. I mean, as simple as I made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you can spin it into something that helps you teach something, sell something. And it's usually because you're tapping into the universality of that story. And that's how you spin that particular story's straw into literary gold. Now, whenever you're using true stories, unless you're talking about only yourself, you need to consider the ethics of the situation. So if I'm including other people and those other people look bad, you don't want to make it obvious who that other person is. And yes, I know there are these tell all memoirs. And honestly, I mean, I guess that works really well if you're a celebrity because all that stuff sells your memoir. Sometimes it's made up. I mean, I've heard some stories about Prince Henry's. He told a bunch of stuff that didn't quite happen that way in order to sell more books. But that does not work. It will bite you in the butt if you do that for a client attracting story. You want to be very careful of the ethics because you can get your butt sued. You don't want your butt sued. In fact, you don't want any part of you sued. Also, when you're writing about these challenging times, be aware that you may experience writer's block. Yes, writer's block actually exists, and writing about something that's challenging or painful is one of the many triggers that can cause writer's block. Sometimes writer's block is your brain's way of protecting you from going into a painful place. And if what you're writing about is triggering a painful memory, sometimes you'll find yourself procrastinating and not wanting to write about it because you're experiencing an emotional glitch in your author switch. So, when you are trying to spin your challenging straw into gold, realize that you may experience writer's block, but understanding that that's why you're experiencing writer's block helps you unglitch your author switch. Now, when you're telling these stories, you also want to use literary devices. I highly recommend reading John Franklin's book, Writing for Story. It's all about narrative nonfiction, and he teaches a really nice framework for using fictional frameworks to tell true stories that resonate, that feel real, that bring out the emotional truth of that story. Now, your marketing stories can also be a way to change your straw into gold or your lead into gold if you're going to be an alchemist rather than a Rumpelstiltskin. And that's, again, like I was saying, Dan Henry's many stories. You take your story, and in that story, there's a way that you can bridge to what the real message is. So, for example, I recently was experimenting with this whole money story idea. And I talked about how I found my Keurig machine. Our neighbor was like putting some old furniture out, and we went and looked at it because we needed a couple of chairs. And sitting on one of the chairs was a Keurig machine. Now, I had been wanting a Keurig machine. Now, just in case you don't know what a Keurig machine is, it's a coffee maker that you put these little, they're called K cups. You put this little coffee cup in there, you close it, you push a button, and it makes you a cup of coffee. And I've been having like 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day since I got my Keurig machine. And like 1 cup's hazelnut and 1 cup's espresso and 1 cup's vanilla bean. It's like I'm loving my Keurig machine. But I was able to spin that story into a story about something that I'm doing. This particular month, this month of July, I'm talking all about social media and how you can use social media as an author. And I took this Keurig machine story and I spun it into talking about my latest opt-in, which is all about social media mastery for authors. So if you are interested in that, it's called the Author's Social Media Playbook. Just put playbook in the comments or go to bookmarketingclub.com/SM playbook. So if you want a copy of my author's social media playbook, just go to this URL, bookmarketingclub.com/SM playbook, and you can get it for free. It's a really nice ebook and it's fairly short, so it's easy and quick to read, and shares the 3 main principles that you need to use in order to effectively turn your book into a client attracting machine using social media. And that is what I've got for you today. If you have any questions about how you can become the author alchemist or your own Rumpelstiltskin, please reach out to me on social media, anywhere, and I will get back to you. This is Carma Spence saying ciao for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Author Switch podcast and would like to show your support, there are a few ways that you can do that. First, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Additionally, leaving a rating and review would greatly help me reach more listeners and continue providing valuable content. To stay up to date with the Author Switch podcast and gain access to additional information on amplifying your authority, influence, and thought leadership through books, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Carma Spence. For those interested in catching up on previous episodes, including those no longer available on podcast platforms, you can find them all at authorswitch.com/episodes, where you can choose to watch or listen to them at your convenience. Thank you so much for your support and for being a part of the Author Switch community.